Con Guys, and this is the Con. Wait a second.
What is going on?
Technical difficulties.
Hey, Luke, can you hit the intro, please?
All right, let's see. Where are we at?
Hey, folks, we'll cut this part out once we post it.
That's weird.
Something weird's going on.
All right, you know what? Bam. Welcome to the Con Guy Show, everybody. Sorry for the Con difficulties there. This is the Con Guy Show, coming to you. We have the Star Wars All-Stars here tonight.
This is
We're going to
Jim
be talking
with
about the Book of Boba Fett. Book of Boba Fett
here
is
with
the second
theconguy.com.
live-action series on Disney Plus from Lucasfilm.
Zordon did not want 5 teenagers with attitude.
And it's continuing.
My name is Derek Sam.
I'm Danae Sam.
Everybody's
That's my
favorite.
brother.
We are your home for news, opinions, and interviews from the world of Comic-Cons and fandoms. Your ultimate insiders for all things super odd. And all right.
Jim, were you aware that you were talking over the intro there? Or where'd Luke go?
We're having technical difficulties.
Anyways,
Anyways, welcome everybody to the Con Guys Show. Cheeseman's coming
great.
back. We are coming to you from a galaxy far, far away in technology, long time ago, because it's not working very well right now. But tonight we are coming to you to talk about Boba Fett, the Book of Boba Fett. Bam! There's Cheeseman. He's hyper spaced in. How many puns can we put in there? Anyways, My name is Jim. I am one of your hosts tonight. What's another pun for that? One of your galactic hosts? No, whatever. Anyways,
you're behind.
I'm all behind. Sorry for that technical difficulties, but we're gonna have a lot of fun talking about Book of Boba Fett tonight. And who do we have right here to my stage right, my left?
Hey everybody, it's Jake from the Jacoba System coming at you from Columbus, Ohio. Always happy to be on the show and talk about one of my favorite things of all time, Star Wars and Boba Fett, one of the best characters. So let's get into it.
Hello, Jake.
Hey, it's Cheeseman, screenwriter, and here with theconguy.com.
And I'm blasting it out, man. I'm blasting out the show. What's up, everyone? It's me, old buddy Ben. Ben Cleaver here with the Con Guy, and I'm super stoked to be here because I love Boba Fett. I love Tamura Morrison. I love Ming-Na Wen. I love her. Jessica Biels. I love Jennifer Biels. Sorry, Jennifer Biels. I don't know why I said Jessica. We like her too. We love her. That's why I was thinking of it. Both lovely women, and we love them both. It's true. I want to know if Jennifer Biels' character is dead. I hope she's not. I know. I was so disappointed in that scene. I mean, it was kind of exciting, but we're going to talk about that in just a second. Let's just say hello to a few people because it's so great that some of these folks are here with us because we didn't advertise the show hardly at all. Ben. Blood good. Good to see you, Kat. Also, Nathan. Nathan, good to see you. And then Jonathan Wilkinson, thank you for letting us. We were having some difficult.
I was saying the intro was rolling, man.
Was it rolling while you saw my mouth moving? Okay.
No, I just saw the intro and I heard you talking.
You were talking over it.
So
and
strange.
It wasn't playing on yours?
No, I couldn't see it.
Weird.
Yeah. Maybe. You know what? Maybe my computer's just getting hot.
Mine was doing the same thing.
Well.
Strange.
As Jim's.
But you know what? We got better things to talk about. We got Boba, bounty hunter Boba Fett, and mercenary Fennec Shan navigate the underworld when they return to Tatooine to claim Jabba the Hutt's old turf in Lucasfilm's latest live-action series for Disney Plus. It just finished up 7 episodes. Right here at the top of the hour, we're going to give real quick, real kind of high level, Jake, what you think about the series overall. And then we're going to dive in.
I loved it. I mean, yeah, like I said before, Boba Fett. Okay. Nice. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a perfect series. There's definitely a few things I thought was a little odd choices, but the casting, the fact that, we'll get into spoilers. Obviously, they bring in characters from other shows.
Yep.
And, not only Mandalorian, but bringing some animated characters to live action that fans were flipping out about.
Yeah.
So very cool. 100% in. I'm curious to see where it goes from here. Like, we'll get into all this, but it almost ended like, a lot of stuff gets wrapped up for certain characters. So you're like, they could keep it going, or they could just be done with them. I don't know. So, but yeah.
The only other person in the room that probably likes Star Wars more, or at least as much as Jake. Ben.
Hey, everybody. Okay, so my honest thoughts, I think I loved this series because I love Boba Fett so much, not necessarily because it's a great show. And I don't want to be like, oh, it was a crappy show. It's not. But there were some choices with the Boba Fett character and the storytelling that I thought were awesome and amazing. And there were some choices that I just thought were hot garbage. But overall, I really enjoyed I love that meme where it's like Mr. Incredible and he's just going, Star Wars is Star Wars. And I love Star Wars. And so I really liked so much about this show and what they incorporated and some of the new ideas they brought in that overall I liked it. And I'll go back and watch this season again. And I hope they have a season 2.
Me too. Cheese man, get off the couch. Tell us what you think.
I could climb, be all sexy in bed. Although no one would want to see that. But
No.
yeah, I enjoyed the show. I thought it started off good, and I was very kind of excited to see operating in this world of, the original Star Wars and having some of these characters and so many throwbacks and things. It went on a little too long with the flashback storyline. Like, I mean, I enjoyed parts of that, but at one point it just kind of seemed like it was a little too much of that. And I wanted to see more of him in his, full costume. Like, he kept taking his helmet off, which, was kind of my problem with Kylo Ren and all that. But
we'll get into it.
I wish, he had more of his helmet on, but seeing some of the characters that they brought in, and then tying the Mandalorian series into it somewhat, which we'll talk about, I thought that was pretty cool. I think it really ended well, and I really liked, the villain character they brought in kind of at the end. I wish there was more. We'll talk more about that later. I don't want to ruin that, but I really did like the last episode.
Did you guys just hear the music that just started? Okay, I'm going to show you something. I'm on Spotify. This says Epic Version, the Book of Boba Fett main theme. All right, I'm going to hit play.
You might get us flagged if you don't talk over it.
I know, but listen, this is not Book of Boba Fett. What is that?
That's Pirates of the Caribbean.
That's Pirates of the Caribbean. Spotify, you're all messed up. Anyways,
you're drunk, Spotify. Go home.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, thanks, Jonathan. He's going to leave it on so we have one viewer watching. That's awesome.
Where's
All right.
Blood Good?
I think people show up and they know they can come back and watch it later. But
I'll watch it later. It's fine.
Yeah. Hey, so let's talk a little bit about the plot. What? By the way, when is the very first time, Mr. Jake, that we ever got to see who Boba Fett was? Why? Where did Boba Fett come from, and how did he get to where we are now? Our short answer to that.
His first on-screen appearance was in the holiday special from 1978, and it was an animated segment that I don't know if the original idea was that if it was going to be like a pilot for an animated series that never quite ended up, because we ended up getting the Droids animated series and all that. But that's the first time you saw this character. He might have been released like the action figure before then. I know when they made the original Star Wars action figures, they released this character and nobody knew who it was. There's a really great documentary on Disney Plus about Boba Fett called Under the Helmet, and they go way into this, and people were just like so excited, like, who is this guy? Like, we don't know who this character is. He looks awesome though, and they say like he's a bounty hunter and he's a sworn enemy to Han Solo or something. So the biggest thing about Boba Fett back then was the mystique of like not knowing who he was, and it's funny that he's became such a popular character because he has 3 or 4 lines in Empire Strikes Back.
4 total.
And I don't think he says a word in Return of the Jedi, just except when he screams when he falls. But yeah, that was the first time anyone saw him was like, whoa, this guy looks cool.
And then I started going to Star Wars conventions, and way before Book of Boba Fett ever came out, or even before Mandalorian was announced, you know, they had the Mandalorian mercs. They had this whole contingent of Star Wars cosplay Mandalorians, which I don't. It's kind of crazy about how it seems like the Mandalorian, which was the live action series that preceded Book of Boba Fett, the Mandalorian is a direct result of fan fervor. Would you say the same thing, Ben?
Yeah, well, definitely. The thing is this. If you watch the Under the Helmet documentary, you first learn that Boba Fett was originally supposed to be, the design was originally for like a stormtrooper type character, which is interesting because then they utilized that in the prequels as the clone troopers who precede the stormtroopers. But in the expanded universe, the books and a lot of that, they really, which is no longer canon according to Disney, but even when it was canon, it kind of wasn't canon because there were literally hundreds of books that people were writing about the universe of Star Wars. And I don't think they were keeping that good a track of where everything was going. But the whole concept of the planet of Mandalore and the Mandalorian culture and the Mandalorian warriors and their Beskar armor and that sort of thing really developed out of that. A lot of people became fans. And a lot of people loved Boba Fett and his character design, as Jake was saying. He looked really cool. And then this whole thing developed of, there's this whole culture. There's this whole people that are in different tribes that have the same type of armor, but it's different and customized. And that's where things like Mandalorian mercs come out. And this all precedes, I mean, there was, like you said, Jim, fervor for Boba Fett and the expansion of the Mandalorian culture in the Star Wars universe. There was fervor for it in the 90s, leading up to the prequels. And then, of course, we have episode 2. We're introduced to Jango Fett, who was the basis for the clone troopers, who then their armor was designed off of his Mandalorian armor, which then eventually, after he's killed, spoiler alert, becomes Boba Fett's armor. Then he repaints it and he becomes a bounty hunter. And, they took this character that people really loved in the early 80s and late 70s, and they turned it into this phenomenon just because people really loved it. And so now we've got, Boba. It's funny because the Mandalorian TV show launches the Book of Boba Fett, where it's the fandom of Boba Fett really launched what ended up being the Mandalorian TV show.
Yep.
Which I think might have stolen kind of some of his thunder of like what they could have done with the series if he was more of like the bounty hunter kind of thing. So then it's like, well, we got to do something kind of different with it.
Right.
So I think
Weren't they
had
going
Mandalorian not happened first, I think some of the story might have been different in Boba Fett.
Weren't they going to make a Boba Fett movie, and then because Solo didn't do well, they scrapped it, and then they did Mandalorian, and then eventually brought it. Is that what it was?
I think
Something kind of like that.
About right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember
you're right.
I remember that was the big thing when before Solo came out. Was like, well, you know what they're doing next? They're doing a Boba Fett movie. This is gonna be awesome. But then all the backlash because of The Last Jedi, people didn't go see Solo and all that.
And that's a problem because Solo is a good movie. I like Solo a lot.
Really good movie. Yeah,
I did too. I really like Solo. And the thing is, I have a feeling we're gonna see the end scenes of Solo. It's going to play out. From what I understand, they are going to continue that storyline. We're going to see it on Disney Plus, I think, in a series of some sort. Because who was the lead actress? She was the Queen of Dragons, but also
her name is in the movie. Her name is Kira.
Kira. It's
Emily
Emilia Clarke.
Yes,
Emilia Clarke. Yes, thank you.
Because apparently she has been signed on for something with Star Wars, so I'm not sure what that is going to. I'm assuming that's where it is, so that would be fantastic. All right, but let's talk Boba Fett. Let's talk Book of Boba Fett. Well, okay, so we're the end of season 2 of, or was it season 3? Season 2 of Mandalorian. What was the end credit scene that led us into Book of Boba Fett? Anybody?
It shows Jabba's palace. And
that's right.
Bib Fortuna has taken over the throne, and he's all fat, sitting on the throne, just being a pig, whatever. And then Boba and Fennec walk in, and I don't think he even says a word. He just like walks up and shoots him, and just like shoves him off the throne. So that was such an awesome teaser when that happened. Everyone was like, "Holy crap, we're actually getting a Boba Fett series."
Yeah.
You know.
Yep. It was amazing. A little bit controversial for me to say that I think that teaser might have been better than episode 1 of Boba Fett, but Book of Boba Fett, that teaser I loved. I absolutely loved it. Okay, let's talk about episode 1 of Book of Boba Fett. We're going to go through and give a little summary. We have 7 chapters of the book. This is my favorite kind of book review. Book of Boba Fett. I love this. All right. Chapter 1 is called Stranger in a Strange Land. Do you guys remember what's the main part of the plot of Stranger in a Strange Land? Do you guys remember? For one thing,
it shows how he survived.
Yeah, he got out of the mighty Sarlacc pit.
So that was great because did you see the video where they put it side by side with Patton Oswalt's like random ad lib on Parks and Recreation?
No.
So there's an episode of Parks and Recreation from maybe like 8 or 10 years ago. I don't remember. Maybe it's not that long, but there was an episode where Patton Oswalt's character is trying to filibuster the city council meeting. And so he's just talking about, and he's like, here's my pitch for the return of Boba Fett. And he's like, we pan down from the twin sons of Tatooine onto the mighty Sarlacc pit, surrounded by the wreckage of Jabba's barge. And then you see the Mandalorian armored hand of the mighty bounty hunter Boba Fett come out of the maw of the mighty sand beast. And they play it side by side with the scene from Book of Boba Fett, and it's almost perfectly lined up.
Wow.
And I follow Patton Oswalt on Twitter, and he's just like, I feel so justified, because he ad-libbed that entire scene for Parks and Rec. They were just like, just ad-lib on stuff, and he's a stand-up, and he's hilarious, and so he was able to do it.
I wouldn't be surprised if he showed up in some series, because they had Brian Posehn in the first episode of The Mandalorian, so I can guarantee they'll have Patton Oswalt at some point.
Absolutely. Yeah. And he's done this kind of stuff. He was in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and that sort of thing. So he's no stranger to, these types of franchises. But that was the scene that has been in my mind since I was like 7 years old of like, Boba Fett's got to get out of that Sarlacc. But I have this, you can't really see it. This picture, how do I point? This picture up here is an artist print I bought at a convention of Boba Fett standing in, maybe I can just, no, it's too, I can't get it. It's up on the wall and it's a thing, but it's Boba Fett standing in front of the fiery wreckage, having climbed out of the Sarlacc pit. It's something I've always dreamed of. So being able to see this hi, Amanda, happy birthday. So being able to see this in live action of him like waking up and the thing where he grabs the air pipe off of the stormtrooper and then like freaking blasts everything and climbs out. And the fact that they have him climb out through the side of the Sarlacc and up through the sand instead of just out of the mouth was insane. I loved it. Anyway, sorry. I'm fangirling all over this. I apologize.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. But do you know, wait a second, I was trying to find it just now. This was not the first time that it's not going to work. I used to subscribe way back in the early 80s. Sorry, I'm an old man. I used to
subscribe on the screen right now.
Well, that's Luke, help.
Click.
Oh. Sorry. No, back in the 80s, one of the comic books that I subscribed to was Star Wars. And in 1983, I'll share it with you as soon as I got to convert a picture or whatever. In 1983, that's when Boba Fett actually came back. They actually featured Boba Fett surviving the Sarlacc pit and coming out exactly like what had happened here. So it was back Marvel. It was Marvel Comics. And so 83, they started it back then. Boba Fett had been rescued. He was coming back. And I've been waiting for this. Let me see here. I'm going to upload the picture. But that's why this is such a cool thing, is anyways, it doesn't matter. I'm trying to tell the story while I'm trying to do this technical stuff on the side. It just doesn't work out so well. But the thing is, for the fans, the fans that read the comics series, like Boba Fett's been alive for us for quite some time. So this is kind of a cool thing that they finally brought it to canon on Disney Plus. So anyways, it happened like this. They had him. I think back there he blasted his way out of the Sarlacc pit instead of like barely waking up. I don't know. We'll see. All right. So episode number 1 is when he escapes from the Sarlacc pit, and also
the music.
Come on, Jim, tell us the story.
Who's playing that music?
We have a score now.
Well, StreamYard has a new thing where you can put background music on while you're
I was gonna say, I hope this isn't copyrighted because
I don't think it's mine.
Anyways. But okay, so let's go ahead and talk about hey Luke, can you turn that off, please? All right.
Oh, that was you did that on purpose?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he did that. You know, Luke keeps screwing with Jim while we're in the middle.
He
of the
gave me
podcast.
permission to
Very
screw with him during shows now. He's like, we need to make it more interesting. Start poking at me.
You can poke at me all you want. Hey, listen. So let's talk about episodes 1, 2, 3, and 4. We have to talk about the parts. Luke, it's 7:30. We got to get on with this podcast. All right. So let's talk about the fact that episode 1, 2, 3, and 4 had a storytelling device which kind of divided fans a little bit. Which was they told a lot of backstory. While Boba Fett, the 60-year-old man of Boba Fett, I'm not making fun of Timmer, his age. I'm just saying they wrote Boba Fett as an older warrior now, which was kind of odd. But he soaked in the what they call the Bacta,
BACTA,
the Bacta tank, and as he was in there, he would have visions of his past. And so, real quick, his past was he broke out of the Sarlacc pit and he got rescued by the Jawas. And then what was it?
Took his armor, and then he was taken by the Sand People, the Tusken Raiders.
Tusken Raiders, yep.
He wasn't rescued by the Jawas. They just stole his armor and then took
Oh, that's
off.
right. It was just Jawas being Jawas. That's,
Jawas being Jawas.
That's right. Jawas being Jawas. Let me see. And then he met up with Fennec Shand, and she was in dire straits. What was wrong with her?
She got
You
shot.
skipped over a lot there.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. How about this? Ben, why don't you do a little preview of episode 1 for us real quick?
Well, how about this? In the interest of just saving time, let's talk about the overall storyline of the
Sounds
first
good.
4
That's
episodes, because we had the parallels of, we already knew he was with Fennec Shand from the Mandalorian and from that teaser scene that we talked about, where he comes in, he's badass, he shoots Bib Fortuna, shoves him out of the throne, and sits down. So we're like, oh, this is insane. But I think a big thing that a lot of fans wondered, and what we wanted to know, was how to get out of that Sarlacc pit. And what has he been doing for the last 5 years? Because we know at this point in the timeline, it's 5 years after Return of the Jedi. So he hasn't, how long was he in the Sarlacc pit? Well, we don't really get an answer for that. He could have been in there a couple days, a couple hours, a couple months. I don't know. Probably not a couple months, I would imagine. So we have this thing where he finally makes his way out. Of course, he's wrecked. The Jawa steals armor. He gets taken in as a prisoner by the Sand People. I would have actually preferred the first 3 episodes entirely be the flashback, instead of this flashing between here's Mos Espa and then here's the flashback, and then here's Mos Espa and here's the flashback.
Right.
Yeah.
You do the first 3 episodes as the flashback to the Sand People times where he's with the tribe, and then you do a hard break, and episode 4 starts after his appearance in the Mandalorian. Of course, the end of episode 3, he meets up with Fennec Shand and they decide, but suffice to say, I think it rounded out his character a lot. And one of my favorite memes I've seen recently was, hey, it looks like a lot of guys are really upset that Boba Fett isn't acting like the tattoo they have of him on their left shoulder. And it is, I think we were expecting that guy who walks in and shoots Bib Fortuna and shoves him out of the throne and sits down. We wanted this merciless bounty hunter to be taking things over. But like, to your point, Jim, we had that in the Mandalorian. And even when the Mandalorian made his appearance in Book of Boba Fett, that was his intro. He killed 8 guys.
This is true. I forgot about that episode. Yeah.
And so I think that's what a lot of people were expecting with this, and they're a little disappointed. But also, are you going to have a successful show where it's just Boba Fett killing people for 7 episodes? Like,
no.
I don't know if that's going to be good. So they wanted to make the character grow. I think this is what I'm observing, and showing his time with the Sand People, with the Tusken Raiders, and learning not only to be skilled and ruthless, but how to be compassionate and how to care. You know, if you look back at the storyline of the Clone Wars and all this kind of stuff, where Boba Fett saw his dad killed before him, he saw a million guys who looked like his dad that were bred purely to be military personnel and fight in the Clone Wars as clones, obviously. And then he's out on his own and gets picked up by these ruthless bounty hunters. And that's been his life. And so that's what brings so much weight. And a lot of people didn't watch Clone Wars, I don't think. But that's what brings so much weight when he looks at like Black Chrysanthemum and says, word of advice from an old bounty hunter, don't work for scuzzbags, you know, and that sort of thing. I think it is the story of Boba kind of turning over this new leaf and trying to do good by people, because people have never done good by him except for ruthless people who then didn't do good by him for his entire life. Sorry, I'm getting philosophical now. Power Ranger Vespas. Let's talk about that.
Wait. Before we do that, though, no, because that's gonna we're getting to that real quick. But a major development, though, in the background of Boba Fett, that I think they went out of their way to humanize the Sand People. Like the Sand People, the Tusken Raiders became a group of people that we could almost sympathize with. Like before, they were just like these crazy people out in the sand. But Boba Fett, he actually sympathized with them, and he considers himself one of them. That's his tribe now. So I think you're right, Ben. That's where the growth, the change, what is it that changed Boba Fett from what he was, which was just a bounty hunter and just getting his next kill and turning it in, but to this, he kind of grew into, and this is a question I'm going to ask. Did he be, a lot of fans were thinking, not when I say a lot of fans, I hate to look on Twitter and say that's a lot of fans at Twitter.
The internet buzz. You can just say the internet buzz.
Was he too honorable? Was he too much of a good guy at the end of his Tusken Raider time? Even before his Tusken Raider time, he was kind of still, was he too good? And instead of being the outlaw that he was.
I'll throw it to these two.
What do you guys think?
I already talked way too much.
No.
I saw a funny comment that someone said, people love the Mandalorian because he acts the way that we want Boba Fett to act. And I'm like, I don't agree with that at all. Because like I said before, Boba Fett was such a popular character because he was basically, back in the day, an open book. So he was just open to interpretation for all these fans to like, this is my version of Boba Fett. He does this and stuff. So then once they got into his character in Attack of the Clones and showed his backstory and gave more, you know, it wasn't just like a however you think this character is kind of thing. And to have him make those decisions and not be just ruthless, but actually be smart and think, you know, if I just go around killing everyone and any single person who comes in, like I'm not really going to get anywhere. Like he wants to move forward and settle down and kind of like, you know, retire in Jabba's palace. But, you know, that's why I think the Mandalorian has people are much more forgiving about him because he didn't have 40 plus years of buildup of these fans like going crazy over him. Because when you think about Mandalorian, like he's a badass in the first episode, but in that first episode, he all of a sudden has a heart and saves this kid. And then that completely changes his character for the rest of the story. So because he wasn't around before, you don't have fans being like, that's bullcrap. Why wouldn't he just like kill the baby and get the money and say it's like they want him to be like a, you know what I mean? Like, so yeah, I don't know. I don't have a great answer, I guess. But it's like,
I think it's understandable that people want him to be that badass bad guy. And I do think there were opportunities in Book of Boba Fett to continue having him be this kind of semi-honorable anti-hero and made him a little more ruthless than he was. Because I think he was a little hesitant on the trigger in some cases, and it could have made it, you could interpret that as wisdom, or you could interpret that as they didn't want to make him as violent as that. And it is Disney Plus, but still, you know, you've had plenty of violence in Mandalorian too. So
yeah, I think it's both. I think they wanted to tone down some stuff, but I also think, like you guys were saying, he had this whole big life experience with the Tusken Raiders, so he has a new point of view on things. So it's character development. I don't know.
Well, they basically did like the Dances with Wolves or the Last Samurai thing kind of with him, where he was kind of like a fish out of water kind of thrown into their environment, which kind of educated him to kind of think about life and his situation, or even his fighting style kind of differently, and kind of trained with them, which actually benefited him in the end, with his kind of final standoff and all that. But again, I really feel that having Mandalorian first, I think really did steal kind of the thunder. And I think that's part of the reason why they were okay with like aging him up a little bit, than what we probably would have expected as a Star Wars fan, just because it would be like, well, same thing as Mandalorian, same guy, same age, same kind of style of like personality. Like, so I think him being more diplomatic and being kind of like a little older and wiser kind of a thing, which maybe they'll do something that takes kind of like how they're doing prequel kind of stuff with some of the other stuff. Maybe they'll explore his character in the past at some point, and have him the mask on and do more of that kind of stuff at some point. But I think this chapter, and maybe why they call it Book of Boba Fett, is just kind of doing this chapter of his life. But maybe it'd be cool if they explored different timelines of his life.
Well, speaking about chapter 2, how cool was that basically Wild West train robbery scene?
Dude, the train heist.
Yes, it was amazing.
Yes. That was so much fun. That was so much fun. And it was, because there are so many aspects, and with Dave Filoni, Dave Filoni is such a Star Wars nerd, and he's dug so deep into what George Lucas was doing with the originals and how he was looking at everything from Flash Gordon to the Magnificent Seven to Westerns in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And Dave Filoni really, in the best way, ham-fisted Western into into this. And at the train heist episode, and they introduced the Pike Syndicate, which was huge in the Clone Wars series, and into live action, which we did have some Pikes in the Han Solo movie, but not to this level. And but to bring in this hover train, and it's running spice through the desert, and they're shooting the sand people, and for him to go out, and we did get some of that ruthlessness where he kills the biker gang and steals their bikes and brings them back to the tribe so that they can organize and raid the train. And that was such a fun episode. So that's why, this is some of the brilliance that I'm looking at with this, is where I'm like, yes, this was awesome. Even though he didn't have the helmet, he didn't have the jetpack, he was just robe man, and it was still so much fun.
Okay. Episode 3, let's talk about it. Vespa bike episode. There's a gang stealing water, and Boba Fett, since he has taken over the town.
So this was directed by Robert Rodriguez. He did a couple episodes. Did he do the first one also?
Rodriguez
did
first. Yeah.
First, he did first, third, and the last one, 7, I think.
Yeah.
So if you know Robert Rodriguez, he has a very quirky style filmmaking. Like he has a lot of awesome stuff, but there's always a lot of weird like comedy and stuff. He's a guy who did From Dusk Till Dawn, Desperado and stuff, and then he also did Spy Kids, like all these movies and stuff. So which is also why you get Danny Trejo in his episodes.
Which is awesome.
So
that was cool.
But the thing, so everyone was upset because there was this group of punk cybernetic, what they're called the mods. They have modifications where their arms are, droid arms and whatever.
They modify themselves with technology.
Right.
Basically. They replace eyes and arms and, appendages and organs.
So I don't think people really cared so much about that, but the fact that they are all driving these brightly colored, like Vespa looking speeder bikes and stuff. So me and my friends were talking about this too. Like they're like, it's such a weird thing because it takes you out of the episode, and it's like, but then I guess the reason why they did it was it's a tribute to George Lucas and American Graffiti. Classic cars and everything that he grew up with and stuff, which is why you get a lot of stuff like that in the prequels, which is the first time I remember seeing something in Star Wars that was like, what? Like the episode 1 at the pod race when they had the 2-headed announcer who's like, "Hey everybody, welcome to Mos Eisley." I'm just like, what is going on?
Comedian Greg Proops.
Greg
Proops did the voice.
Yeah, but it's just like, this is a Star this is a Star Wars movie. Why is this weird dude? And then in Attack of the Clones, where Obi-Wan Kenobi goes into like a Johnny Rockets and like talks to the ship, and they're all like, it's like a diner, like the guy's got like a mustache, like, hey, how's it going? It's like, this is very odd, but you can see them. They're doing a little take on that, like for George Lucas's like love of the 50s and classic cars and stuff. So that was part of why that was also done. It's also heavily influenced by the mods. They were called the mods in the 60s, the Who, Quadrophenia and all that stuff, where they rode those scooters with all the mirrors and stuff. So that part isn't as bad. Like, I'm just like, okay, the brightly colored bikes are weird. I would prefer they just had like speeder bikes or swoop bikes and stuff. Mm-hmm. But then you get this chase scene where they're all driving, like they're driving through the streets, and it's a very slow. I saw a great meme someone made where it's like the next episode of Book of Boba Fett, and it was the scene from Seinfeld where George Costanza's on the rascal scooter, and the old people are chasing him down the sidewalk.
Oh man!
So, but that was the first episode of the series that fans were really like, "What? Like, what is this?" But I agree somewhat, but it didn't like ruin the series for me. I was just like, it was just, like I said, another example of something happening where I'm like, that's a weird choice for Star Wars.
I feel like the description of it being a tribute to George Lucas and American Graffiti and his love of hot rod culture in the 50s and that sort of thing, that makes it much more palatable for me than it was just watching the episode and being like, this is odd. Yeah. So I can appreciate that more. It's like I can appreciate a lot. I don't like to watch the prequels necessarily, but I really appreciate them for what's good about them, which there's an amazing story in there if you really focus. And
if you take all three movies and cut them down to one movie, you got something good.
You got a great movie there. But I just think there was some weird, my whole thing is like, I love the original trilogy. That's my thing. I'm an OT-OG. The prequels have a great story that have been poorly executed, and the sequels are they have a poor story, but they're really well executed.
That's a good way to put it. That's a real good way to put it. Yeah, I haven't thought about it.
But yeah, and then, but my thing going back to Dave Filoni, which him and Jon Favreau really steering the ship on a lot of this, is they are Star Wars nerds. Like they would put any of us in our place if we were to ever talk Star Wars with them. They'd love it. They'd be happy to talk to us about Star Wars, but their knowledge goes far. It's like they went to Star Wars divinity school, like they know everything about it. And if you've ever watched like an interview with Dave Filoni, he's just a big nerd and he loves it. And I love him for that. And he wears a cowboy hat. But so they, they're steering the ship on this, and they're wanting the thing is, you can tell when you watch The Mandalorian, they know what they're doing. You go back and watch Clone Wars, which Dave Filoni created, and he was like dubbed with a magic lightsaber by George Lucas. Here, take this and go. And you can tell he's a guy that loves the universe, loves adding things to it while keeping the spirit. And so that's why part of that hot rod thing makes sense to me. And you can see that going through both Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett. And that's why ultimately I liked it, because again, with Robert Rodriguez, you're exactly right. He'll do some great stuff and then some stuff that's really weird. And he directed the finale, and I think we saw both of those aspects in the finale as well. But I'm getting a little ahead of ourselves.
Well, no, that's great. I loved what you just said. I love that. But let's jump real quick to my least favorite episode. Not because it was a bad I don't think they had bad episodes. I think they did have some. They had a couple of episodes that were great. But this next one just It was chapter 4. Chapter 4. I just had it up. It was the chapter. I just had it up in front of me, and
Boba partners with Fennec Shand. So it's the one where he meets up with Fennec in the desert.
Yep, it's called The Gathering Storm,
which is the scene from Mandalorian where Mandalorian leaves Fennec Shand for dead, and then we see this pair of feet walk up to her. And we can talk about the spur sound effect. I'm sure Jake has thoughts on that as well. And then we have that scene where they're like hanging around, and First of all, I kind of love that Boba Fett had this bantha that was just like his best friend in the desert for God knows how long. Like it was just Boba and a bantha for like maybe it was like a year and a half before they even met up, because it is supposed to be 5 years from the beginning of episode 1 to when he meets up with Fennec Shan. Which is a key point when they finally get Slave One, jumping a little bit ahead because we'll talk about what happens in between, and they go back to the Sarlacc pit because he thinks his armor's in there. And then he's like, that's where I was all those years ago. And that line kind of felt forced because they were like, remember, this is a long time later. But the scene with the Sarlacc pit was amazing. But yeah,
which episode was that? That was we missed it. That was
that was this one.
Chapter 4. Okay,
that was chapter 4.
Good.
But yeah, he meets up with Fennec Shan, and then they decide they need to get back Slave One. Which I don't know if it's still called Slave One. There's debate right now as to what it's officially called.
They call it. They gave a name for like the style of ship.
It's class. It's a fire spray.
Yeah, fire spray. But like when I was going to show this later with my massive collectible amount here, but the Lego previously called Slave One, but on the box it just says Boba Fett's Starship. Right. Because they didn't have a name for it. So that's a whole other conversation with them changing the name. But
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then they have this like almost like this 2-person heist episode where they have to sneak into Jabba's palace, which real quick little side tangent here. When I think it's the first or second episode when they're threatening the assassin who tried to kill Boba Fett and they drop him into the Rancor pit. I'm like, it's been 5 years. Don't anybody know that the Rancor be dead? Like, like the Rancor's been dead for 5 years. People have got to know that. If maybe Bib Fortuna was just that bad at his job that like he never even threatened anybody with it, so they were all like, "Oh, he must still have it." But the Rancor's been dead for 5 years. They didn't. The guy still thought they had it,
but. Which is what we skipped in episode 3, one of the best parts of episode 3 with the twins. That scene, the 2 giant Hutt twins, which I thought were great.
I love
carried, Egyptian style by all these
on their litter.
What?
I didn't see there was the running gag about the litter. And we were like, "What's a litter?" And then we realized it's them being carried on that thing. It's
I love how when they were carrying it too, it was just like bending. It just looked like
But they showed up and they basically said, "It's yours. We don't want it anymore. We apologize." And as a gesture of goodwill, they gift a Rancor to Boba, which is kind of cool because that comes
with the nose ring.
Yeah, with the nose ring, it's a big deal later. And then also that is where Boba kind of doesn't start a partnership, but at least there's a little an understanding between him and Black Chris. How do you say his name? Chrysanthemum. Because that's when he gives him the advice, isn't it? Like, be careful.
Yeah, it says don't work for scuzzbags.
All right, on to 4. Sorry, I wanted us to not forget that awesome scene, which I loved. All right, so 4. You were talking about how you were breaking into Boba's palace.
Yeah, they do this whole heist into Boba's palace to get the ship back. And then there's the scene when Boba finally gets into the ship. They're trying to open the doors, and he's like trying to fly it out and banging into the walls and stuff. And it reminded me of that scene from Galaxy Quest where they're first flying the ship out of the hangar, and he like just drifts to one side and grinds to it. But for me, as a Star Wars fan who obviously loves Slave One, as I will continue to call it, that scene had me like, it's like banging your dad's car against the side of the garage or something when you're a kid. And I know we're skipping over a lot. There was also the great, like the old Yeller scene or whatever with the bantha where he's like, "Go on, get out of here, make baby banthas," that whole thing. And it doesn't want to go, and it's got this big tongue, and it's silly.
Oh yeah,
that was fun. Sorry, I'm going off again.
Let's talk about other things. Let's talk about, let's just jump into Chapter 5, written by Jon Favreau, directed by Bryce Dallas Howard. It was a magnificent hour. Return of the Mandalorian. Did you guys see? It's on all over the internet. The the bar where there's like hundreds of people in a bar and they're watching this episode, and then when Mando walks through the meat locker, the bar goes crazy. Yes, he's back. He's back. He's back. Tell us. Okay, let's talk about this scene for a second. What happened?
I feel like that was edited. I feel like
that's a popular meme where they superimpose different things on the screen. It was the actual footage is like from like who knows, like some soccer game or something.
Right, I was gonna say,
what you mean? I was duped.
You were duped, Jim.
Yeah.
But this episode was great. A lot of people were like, "Wow, that's the best episode of the series." Boba Fett's not even in it. He's not in the whole episode, and it's basically another episode of The Mandalorian. It's like almost like the first episode of season 3, because the only connection really you get to the other series is Fennec shows up at the end, is like, "Hey, we got a job for you," you know. So obviously that was a big surprise to a lot of people. They did hint at it at the end of episode 4, where he's like, "I have plenty of credits, but I need his muscle." And then she's like, "Well, we can buy muscle." And then you hear the Mandalorian theme play. So everyone's like, "Oh, okay." So yeah, awesome episode. Just, you know, it goes into more with him having the dark saber and, you know, who is worthy to wield it. And he's having issues like swinging it because it's like, you know, she's like, the armorer is back from The Mandalorian.
Yep.
There's so much to get into. I mean, it's like he's trying to like describe
just the highlights. Yeah. We don't need to get into all the details.
The Mandalorian, he has the spear from season 2, which he says, "I want you to melt this down so we can give it to Grogu." And then they make, you don't find out till later, but they make a chainmail shirt for Grogu.
Which is so cute.
Yeah. And there's a whole thing back and forth with the other Mandalorian. I forget what his name is, but he's voiced by Jon Favreau. He's the big Mandalorian.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. They alter his tone. They like tone it down or whatever it is, like the voice, whatever. But yeah, he is actually related to the person who like forged the saber. So he's like, it belongs. Yeah, he's like, it belongs in my hands or whatever. So then they do that whole battle about that, and then the armorer just flat out asks, she's just like, "Din, you know, did you take your helmet off?" And he's like, "Yeah." So she's like, "Okay, well now you're no longer Mandalorian by our rules,
by our creed." Well, it's the reciting of the creed. It's like, have you ever taken your helmet off? Has anybody ever taken it off of you, etc.? This is the way.
Yeah. And he could have lied, but because he's an honorable, you know, Mandalorian, he sticks to the creed. He admits, like, "Yeah, I took off my helmet."
So to redeem his honor, what is his mission? This is basically what's setting up Mandalorian season 3. I think
it's kind of vague that she says, like, you have to go. What was it like
he has to bathe himself in the waters beneath Mandalore, but it's been destroyed, and so you can't. And
so she's like, "This is the way." So he's like, "Okay, I'll just be going then."
But also, isn't that where Bo-Katan is? Wait, because Bo-Katan came up.
Bo-Katan's trying to retake Mandalore.
Right.
She took Gus Fring to jail. I don't know. That's the last time I saw.
I think I texted Ben, or I was like, this episode almost felt. I mean, it was cool that it was right here. It was odd. This was a big pivot from what we'd gotten in episodes 1 through 4. Then all of a sudden we hit episode 5. And everybody, the buzz online is, yes, the best episode. But this felt like it could have been the final episode, either the first episode of season 3 or the final episode of season 2 of Mandalorian. It almost felt like, wow, we got the big Luke Skywalker moment. Let's not ruin it and put in another episode. Because it felt like this one could have been tacked onto the end. I'm not saying it was, but because it is setting up what's going to happen with Mandalorian going forward. He's going back to finding whatever under Mandalore, and of course, in the next episode, Grogu is back. So, what were you gonna say, Ben?
Well, and I was gonna say, I kind of feel like Book of Boba Fett, oddly enough, as we discussed before, the passion for the Boba Fett character is what launched the Mandalorian. The Mandalorian became great under its own power. And then that relaunched Boba Fett back into the canon. And I just kind of feel like the Book of Boba Fett is part of the Mandalorian series. Like, we've got a lot of Mandalorians in the show, The Mandalorian, and so it's about Din Djarin, obviously, Din Djarin. But then you've got the stories of all the other Mandalorian characters. So I just consider Book of Boba Fett part of the Mandalorian story arc. So it makes sense to me that if they're bringing in Mando, that they would focus on a couple episodes on him to bring him into the Boba Fett storyline. But the other thing I was going to say is forget J.J. Abrams, forget Rian Johnson, give the next trilogy to Bryce Dallas Howard.
Yeah.
Do it, give it to her, keep it in the family. Her dad directed Solo.
Yep.
After they fired the other ones, but the
Lego guys.
I love those guys, but yeah, they probably weren't right for this.
Right. So I'm just I love Bryce Dallas Howard's directing style for these episodes, and
plus her dad, Ron Howard, is a very good friend of George Lucas, having met him on the set of what's his first movie?
American Graffiti.
Yeah, that he was the star of that, and wasn't he the director of Willow?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's such a good. I actually was fortunate enough I was able to interview Bryce and Dave Filoni when we were talking about all this stuff a couple of years ago before it all came out, and I was just and I thought the same thing. Ben, it's like, wow, what a great connection, what a great family connection to George Lucas, and I think Filoni would be fully on board. All right, real quick, episode 6 and 7. I know I don't want to skim through them, but episode 6 was the only episode of the season directed by Dave Filoni. And what do you think and what do you think of episode 6? Because it was another big da-da-da.
There was just so much in that episode.
Yeah.
It's just like it was just jam-packed. Not only do you get the return of Luke Skywalker with and of course Grogu. So I guess when they did when they did the season finale of season 2 of Mandalorian, they brought Luke back, of course. But then a guy took that
green lightsaber.
A fan or whoever took that footage, who's like a deep fake master dude, and like altered it and made it look better than how they did it. And I guess they hired that guy to come into the Book of Boba Fett and do all the Luke, because that's the biggest thing. You watch the scene, you're like, holy crap, that looks so much better. Because it looked okay, like in the season finale of Mandalorian, but way better now. And it's like uncanny, like what they can do now with this deep fake and the whatever de-aging and stuff. Because I guess it was like a mixed thing. They had an actor do that, but they also had Mark Hamill act out the scenes, and I think they pitched his voice different and did all that stuff.
Well, so they did a lot of digital audio for him too. They just had like a record of Hamill's voice from the late 70s, early 80s, and they used a lot of digitizing in that as well.
That's amazing technology.
It's insane.
Yeah. So you get Luke Skywalker back, you get Grogu back, you get Ahsoka Tano back.
That was so cool.
You get the introduction, first time seeing. You also get Cobb Vanth back by Timothy Oliphant.
Yep,
the Marshal, and then you get the premiere live action of a very popular character from the Clone Wars, Ben. Who did we see?
Cad Bane. Yep. I love Cad Bane. So this was another aspect of that Dave Filoni turning it into a Western. Cad Bane has been a staple across the Clone Wars series of this Western black hat, villain who is honorable in his own right, but he's a ruthless guy. And he's got this history with Boba Fett. There's a whole thing about, the dent in Boba Fett's helmet is from Cad Bane. And we have no idea how that happened. So, there's a thing about like the dent in Boba Fett's helmet is from Cad Bane doing something. And a lot of people are like, well, that doesn't stand up because it's freaking Beskar. It's freaking Beskar. So how are you going to put a dent in Beskar? Nothing can dent Beskar except Beskar.
Is his helmet? Is Boba Fett's helmet? Is that supposed to be Jango's helmet that he took after his dad? That's supposed to be his armor.
Yeah, his armor is also supposed to be Jango's. He took Jango's.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay, yeah. Gotcha. Okay.
But Cad Bane is such a cool character because he's this. I think he's an Andoran. He's a blue alien character, and to see him in live action, there were some complaints in the internet buzz of like, he didn't look like his he didn't look enough like his character from Clone Wars. I'm like, bro, nobody looks enough like their character from Clone Wars. It's a highly stylized animation. Like,
Yeah.
you're not gonna get that in live action. And so I
Count-
thought it was
Count
What?
Dooku in the Clone Wars, his face is like this like skinny, like long thing. It's such a weird like character design.
so I thought the transition or the interpretation of putting Cad Bane into live action was awesome. I don't know if it was I think it was mostly practical. I don't know if there was CGI in there, but just the mouth movement, I think it was makeup.
Yeah, it looked like it.
But it looked so good, and I liked it a lot. And then, of course, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen episode 7, he comes back in episode 7, and he's great in that too. But
Was it voiced by the same person?
I think so.
I think so. I don't know. I should have looked into that more, but they have a little bit more effect on his voice in the animated series, a little bit of flange or something like that. But in this one, it was much more straightforward sounding voice, but it sounded like the same voice.
They said that
He was kind of dressed like Clint Eastwood a little bit too, like his kind of with the flat kind of hat and the way they kind of had him kind of like walk in and stuff. He had a little.
Well, that's how he is
Clint
in the
Eastwood.
animated series too.
Yeah, well, they said that,
Baloney.
Ben mentioned earlier the spur sound that Boba Fett had in the Mandalorian scene, and also Empire Strikes Back when he walks, they added the spur sound because they thought he was influenced by like a Clint Eastwood type character. But then you have Cad Bane, who is like totally Clint Eastwood. But I also heard that he was supposed to be influenced by Lee Van Cleef, the other actor from one of those like those old Western movies and stuff.
Nice.
But it's very similar. But yeah, talk about the Western influence. You even get the classic, showdown in the Western, like the long. They're both standing at the end of the
high
street.
noon.
Yeah, the high noon, exactly. So yeah, you get that awesome scene, which that was another thing people were debating about was, did Cobb Vance get killed or did he just get shot in the shoulder, which we'll get into in episode 7.
We're missing one critical scene from this episode though. We went back through the canyons from
yes.
Phantom Menace. Isn't
Beggar's
that weird?
Canyon.
Yeah, Beggar's Canyon makes you nostalgic for
and you get to see
Phantom
Walker.
Menace. It's so weird. Like Dave Filoni, he just has a way of, and Jon Favreau making me actually like the prequels even more and more. I love that.
Well, and the
Here's
fact
the
that
big-
he was in a Naboo N1 starfighter from episode 1. That's the only movie you see those in.
Yep.
His biggest test would be if he can bring back Jar Jar Binks and make people like him.
You never know. He might be.
I don't know if
able to-
Filoni will even touch that. I don't know.
All right, real
The
quick.
actor was a nice guy. We met him.
What you say?
The actor was a nice guy. We met him at that robot chicken.
Ahmed Best.
Oh,
See, that
yeah.
was a thing that the hate for Jar Jar Binks was so real in the internet that drove him to, I want to say he was almost driven to like suicidal thoughts or something like that, just from the backlash he got online for hate for the character he played in a movie.
Yep.
That's absolutely
Crazy.
ridiculous. One other key point from this episode at the end of it, Luke, they give the little mesh shirt to Grogu, and Luke says he has to choose between Yoda's lightsaber and train as a Jedi or the mesh Mandalorian Beskar shirt, and then go back to join Din Djarin, the Mandalorian. And we
Takes us into episode 7. What was his choice, Ben?
well, clearly, and we don't really find out it. Well, a little ways into the episode, Luke's X-wing comes flying into. What's Amy Sedaris's character's name?
I'll look it up.
What?
I'll look it up.
Anyway, the X-wing comes flying in, and obviously it's R2 flying it, and out pops Grogu. So we know, Grogu chose the path of the Mandalorian, obviously, which was, I guess, most of us kind of knew in the back of our mind, the canon says that Ben Solo was Luke's first apprentice, so it wouldn't have been Grogu. So, but
Interesting.
it still was a little, in some senses disappointing and in some senses exciting. And then you have this whole thing where it sets up, and it all converges. It sets up the showdown between the Pike Syndicate and Boba Fett, who was obviously going to be betrayed by all the other families and mafias that he made a deal with. Obviously, that was going to happen. I think we all knew it. and then it ends up with this showdown with the Pikes in downtown Mos Espa. They have blown up the bar, the Paradise Bar where Jennifer Beals' character was, and I need to know if she survived. And then you had this batshit insane scene of this, all the enemies are closing in on Boba Fett, but then we get a lot of that Boba Fett and Mando rocketing off with their jetpacks, shooting guys in the face. It brings back that's the Mandalorian.
And the Sundance Kid, like it definitely kind of had that kind of a feel when they buddied up and they're flying around together. That was so good.
And
Amy Sedaris is Pelimato.
Yep. And then they come rolling in on a little rickshaw, a robot rickshaw, and she's like, "Hey, look who I brought! It's little green dude." And Mando's like, "You're wearing the shirt." Like it converged so much stuff that we wanted to see.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, speaking of things we wanted to see, we saw the biker, we saw the Power Ranger kids come in to help. We saw the people from Freetown come in to help because they saw Cad Bane allegedly kill Cobb Vanth. Then we do have this standoff between. I'm trying to go through this quick because we need to wrap up the show.
Yep.
Then we do have this standoff between Cad Bane and Boba Fett, and it really shows Cad Bane still can outgun Boba Fett, but spoiler alert: Boba Fett eventually does get his revenge with his gaffy stick from the Sand People, and he kills Cad Bane, which I thought might have been controversial, but at the same time, Cad Bane's had a huge storyline in these movies. He had to, this was the perfect time to kill him off, in my opinion. And then you have like the creme de la creme, the cherry on top of all this is, Boba Fett's like, we're in a tight spot. Hold on, I'll be right back. And then 5 minutes later, you get Boba Fett riding in on a Rancor, which they set up in episode 4, I think. And he just starts destroying everything. And then there's a King Kong moment where like the Rancor's out of control and he's climbing up the building.
So cool.
It just was. And of course, this was a Robert Rodriguez. And there was some confusing, weird stuff in it. And there was some truly epic, what I would call truly epic shit. So, and then, it ended off on, we've got some storylines tied up. We've got some stuff to look forward to in the future. I'm sure I've missed some stuff just because so much happened in that finale.
It was such a big episode. So big.
It was a huge episode. But this is why I'm saying I want a season 2 of Book of Boba Fett.
I do too.
If this can run parallel to Mandalorian, I'd be satisfied with that.
Yeah, we had, it happens all the time. Like you had what was it? Facts of Life that was going on the same time as what was the other show it got spun off from? Gary Coleman. I can't remember. I need more modern references, by the way.
But that's what I was saying. I thought, if they were going to continue it on to season
different
2,
strokes.
If they were going to continue to season 2, I mean, they still might, but I thought they would have had more of like okay, that's done. Now we got to do this. Or like have some kind of cliffhanger, but it ends with like Boba Fett and Fennec Shand just like walking down the street, like, things are pretty good, huh? All right, and then that's just it. So it's like they could just put a cap on it, or I'm sure fans obviously want to see more. But
so let me ask you just real quick. Many fans, they had Cheeseman, you had a visceral reaction to the Vespa bikes. Did the episode 7 redeem them at all for you?
They seemed a little cooler or whatever, but it just felt too like High School Musical, like kids dressed up in punk outfits, and you have Cyborg Penny Hardaway and Miley Cyrus, but they really should have developed them more, made them feel a little cooler individually. They just felt like they all came as a team, and they're just a little slightly obnoxious, but I think they could have developed them more. Like, Ben calls them the Power Ranger kids.
The mods.
They just
the mods coming to Disney Plus.
Being a fan, like all of us, like of the Lost Boys movies, like having kind of like a young, youthful punk rock kind of gang, like could have been really cool. But it's like if your parents like were like, "Oh, this is punk rock" or something, and like had to dress them up and had them got these High School Musical kids doing it. Like it's just it didn't quite work, the style and the way they were kind of doing it. I mean, I think maybe if they make them a little more gritty or something the next season, if that happens, I think that'll.
And Ben,
better.
to your point, the Cad Bane villain being killed off. You said that you thought it might have been a bigger deal, but maybe
I liked him. I wanted more of him.
I really wanted him to stay on. That was I didn't watch the animated series quite as much, but man, when it was kind of like when they killed off Darth Maul in episode 1. It's like, oh, what a great character.
Star Wars has to have good villains throughout that stick out and are just as iconic and lovable as the heroes.
But Jim, Darth Maul didn't die. They brought him back.
I know,
back in the Clone Wars, which is why you should watch the Clone Wars and in Solo.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then that's why I'm like, I don't know if he's really dead.
Yeah.
Right. And then of course, we do because Filoni has a way of taking characters that are clearly dead and bringing them back. Speaking of, the mid-credits scene at the end of episode 7 has a push-in in the back-to-tank room of Jabba's, now Boba Fett's palace. And we're like, who is that? Who is that? Who's fantastic? I hate those freaking scooters they drive. Of course, Amanda, happy birthday. And they do this push-in. You're like, whose perfectly coiffed hair is that inside that back to tank? And I was like, and then my wife actually pointed it out to me. She's like, that's Cad Bane, that's Timothy Oliphant's character. And then the guy is standing over it, turns around, and it's the mod guy. It's the guy that made all the mod kids who did their mods. So we've got Cobb Vanth healing in a back to tank with an expert modifier there to give him cybernetic implants. So obviously we're pushing that for either next season of Mandalorian, next season of Book of Boba Fett, whatever, obviously it's not going to be in the Obi-Wan series because that predates this by at least 8 to 10 years. But, who knows if we're going to get the Ahsoka Tano, if any of these characters are going to show up in that, I'm sure they will. And then obviously the Andor series that's going to be coming out predates it. It's probably around the same time as or a little before the Obi-Wan series, or maybe around the same time.
We talked about him for a little bit, but a character we kind of glossed over a lot was Black Chrysanthemum, who's the Wookiee bounty hunter who is from the Marvel Comics, the new Star Wars Marvel Comics series. And he has like a big scar over his eye, which he got from Obi-Wan Kenobi. So I'm wondering if he's going to show up in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series.
That'd be cool.
And they have that scene of how he they recreate that for live action.
That character's so good.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was reading Amanda's comment. Did you say that? Did you say that the Black Satan he shows up where?
So he originated from the comic books, the Marvel comics, and there's a whole series where he has an encounter with Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Obi-Wan with his lightsaber is the one who gives him this like scar across his face.
Oh, okay. So and he doesn't have a scar yet, right?
Yeah, I don't know. So I'm like,
wasn't he with Boba Fett though? Like he teamed up with Boba Fett.
Yeah, there was a whole story with them too.
Yeah. So I'm expecting that to happen. I think we're gonna see more of that. As we kind of, and I know Jake, I do want to see what you got there, but as we kind of come down to the end, I just want to know, hey Luke, what did you think of this series? Because towards the end, now that you saw the finale, because you and I were both in the same boat of like, not quite feeling it. Now that we've seen all the way to the end.
Overall, like I'm glad they did it, like in the end and bringing in, like as much as they can bring in traditional Star Wars to these worlds, I think because it's such a big universe, that they've created with all that and with all these characters, I think the more they kind of utilize those characters and also create new ones. And the fact that they brought back, little Grogu, because it was like, seeing him going off and not being part of the Mandalorian, you're kind of like, oh, will it be the same? Because there's something about the relationship. And even on episode 7, like how he even could have died a few times. And then, Grogu actually saved him. You really got to kind of see how finally, like now, like they're meant to like journey together and be together and stuff. And they just have such a fun relation, and even like that, end part of them zooming off into space and him kind of being like a kid wanting to, go to the like him to hit the button again, and
Yep. All right.
I really like, and seeing, in that scene with Luke, seeing the Jedi training kind of like, and how it shadowed kind of, his training with Yoda and stuff, but kind of almost seeing the roles reversed and that kind of a thing. It was cool to.
What planet were they on? Where Luke was at? Is that the Jedi school that we later learned that he's building the Jedi school right now, right? That
Right.
later okay. Cool,
Yeah,
cool.
They say the name. I can't remember what it was though.
Yeah. So it's cool how they're tying that in. I have one question though. Where in the world is Salacious Crumb? I love that little guy.
I think they ate him in season 1 of the Mandalorian. I think no.
No, I want to see him. I love that guy. All right, last question, guys, and I know we got to wrap up here. Where do you think we go from here? Where do you think what's ahead?
Obviously, Mandalorian season 3. We're getting Obi-Wan, so we might, like I said, we might have some crossover there. I want a Fennec Shan series.
Yeah,
I want to because since Ming-Na Wen never ages, they could have they could have it take place whenever. They could have it be a whole series that takes place before Mandalorian, and have that,
We have all this de-aging technology. Well, we don't need it.
we don't need it. Yeah, she's. So yeah, I would love more of the characters like that getting their series. And we're getting also an Ahsoka Tano series, right?
Yep.
And they're doing that. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff on the horizon.
and I think like episode 6 kind of helped to remind us of Ahsoka Tano, and that might have been. I don't remember all the conversations they were having, but she left. She was leaving to go somewhere. I don't. Do we know where she was? Whatever her series is, that's where
there's a whole. I guess they call them. It was expanded universe. The original sequel trilogy that was a book series that came out after Return of the Jedi. What was it, like the Dark Empire or something like that? I forget the name. I'm sorry. And the villain was this guy, Grand Admiral Thrawn.
Yeah,
who was like the guy who basically takes over for
the blue guy.
Yeah, the blue guy. So I think in one of her last scenes in Mandalorian, she's interrogating someone. She's like, "Tell me where he is." And the guy's like, "Who?" And it's like Grand Admiral Thrawn. So fans were like, "Holy crap!"
Well, and he had a storyline in Star Wars Rebels. If you watch Star Wars Rebels, Grand Admiral and Thrawn came in, and there was a thing, and there's a storyline of. At the end of Rebels, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, Thrawn and what's his name, the kid who was training to be a Jedi,
Ezra.
Thrawn and Ezra take off at light speed in a Star Destroyer and disappear somewhere, and so we know that Ahsoka Tano's mission has been, or we assume it's to find Ezra. And who would be with Thrawn, and so if you watch Rebels, you would know that would be Ahsoka, because that's a Dave Filoni thing too. And then so that's what we're assuming. She's looking for Thrawn so she can find Ezra, because he's also Force sensitive and has the potential to be a powerful Jedi.
That's fantastic, Luke. Or do you have any last closing thoughts, guys? Because Jake, I do want to see your toys real quick. That's real quick, Jake. Show us what you have. You have some stuff real quick.
Yeah, I was just going to show a little quick history of the Boba Fett collectibles and action figures. This is the original Kenner 1978 action figure. This is actually my brother's original action figure.
Wow.
I still have it. This was the next wave that came out in 1995. They had the Power of the Force line. So this was like the more updated, like more film accurate version.
Yeah.
And then nowadays we have the from Hasbro, the Black Series, which is the 6-inch figures.
Nice.
So this is
Very
Boba
cool.
Fett from Return of the Jedi. He has that colored jetpack. So just insane detail and stuff. Also, I already showed off the Lego Slave One, but this is my original Shadows of the Empire Slave One from Kenner back in the 90s. I still have it since I apparently never. But just a real quick thing I want to point out too about Boba Fett. Like for years before we ever had any of the Clone Wars or anything, like it was after Revenge of the Sith. I had dreams. I was like, they could easily make a Boba Fett movie and just have it take place in between Empire and Jedi, and have the whole movie just be about him taking Han Solo to Jabba and all these other bounty hunters and people trying to intercept him and stuff. We did get some of that. You guys remember the Shadows of the Empire?
Yeah, I love.
That was a whole multimedia event that happened in like '96. They made everything except a movie. They had like books, toys, CDs, like music soundtracks and everything like that. Video game, yeah. So that they kind of gave us that, but I was like, man, they could easily do that because this is before I would ever think about having to de-age people and have like the deep fake and stuff. Because I'm like, obviously we can't get a sequel to these and have them that So the fact that we have this series, just makes me so happy. Like from when I was a kid, and just like, man, I'm so happy that we finally, 40 years later after this character was initially like show, we got his own.
Yep.
You're really giving his own thing. But one last thing, you have some pictures I was going to show you of some other cool collectibles, right? You guys have those?
You sent us pictures?
Yeah. You don't? Okay. That's fine. Don't worry.
I'll throw this out there because I read the book Shadows of the Empire. It's amazing. I played the video game. I had the soundtrack. They made a soundtrack to a movie that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's lifted from Empire Strikes Back, let's be honest. But there are rumblings on the internet now that a Shadows of the Empire movie is in development. We don't know for sure, but apparently that's the rumor right now.
Well, if they can do the stuff they're doing now, they can do anything.
Yeah,
they could have a whole movie with Luke and Han and Leia as deep fake, and people would be like, that looks awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Hey, and I do have to show one more thing just to show that I'm not crazy. 1983 cover right here. There's Boba Fett on the left and the right. For those of you listening, I'm showing. You can barely see it. On the right-hand side is the cover of a Star Wars comic book from 1983. There's Princess Leia and down there in the bottom, but Boba Fett was back. He was back, baby.
And Jake, to your point that you just made, the Marvel Comics, the current Star Wars run of Marvel Comics is doing a whole story of what happens to Han Solo in Carbonite between end of Empire Strikes Back and beginning of Return of the Jedi, and Vader's after him, and the different.
They even bring in Kira.
And they brought in Kira as well.
Yeah,
so
I just read an issue where it was basically her and Leia having a whole like meeting and stuff.
That's cool. By the way, this is like on the Academy Awards when they start playing the music. That means it's time to go. Guys, this has been great tonight. Thank you so much. You can find me at theconguy.com, James D. Fry on Instagram, or Jim Fry LA on Twitter. Twitter is mean usually, so I'm not on there a lot. Jake, where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at the Jacoba System.
And Luke?
You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at cheeseoncouch and on theconguy.com.
And Ben?
Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Thank you to Jim the Con Guy for bringing us all together tonight to talk about Boba Fett, one of my favorite characters in all of fiction. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram, and you know what? Twitter is mean. Let's all try to get on there and do some good on Twitter. There's a Boba Fett action figure up there with Jake.
Yeah.
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at BENKLIEWER. And remember, folks, the reason I'm drinking out of this red cup is because whenever Ben Cleaver shows up, it's always a party.
All right. Thanks for listening to The Con Guy Show, the official program of theconguy.com. Find us on the WeV Geeks Collective or anywhere you listen to podcasts. And now on sci-fi.radio, Saturdays at 4 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Pacific, both AM and PM. That's 9 o'clock Greenwich. It's sci-fi for your Wi-Fi.